Hey guys, welcome back to another Q&A. Ignore the fan in the background or you shall perish. Let's just hop right into this because we have got a lot of questions here. Our first question is from Zachary Wagster, and he has a few. He asks, what would you say is your favorite what if that you have ever read or watched? I'd say probably Elseworlds Jedi Grievous series, although his what if Anakin was never burned on Mustafar one is also really good. I think Elseworlds probably makes some of the best what ifs that I have ever seen, so I'd say those are probably the ones I'd pick. Second question. Have you ever considered doing voice acting as a profession because your voice impressions are pretty damn good? Well, thank you very much for the compliment. Yes, I have, and at some point I want to, try getting into bigger things, but I want to wait until, well, first of all, I want to wait until I'm financially stable enough where I can afford to pursue such a profession because there are hidden costs involved, and that's not including if you want to get a Screen Actors Guild card, and that there's a fee for that you have to pay every month, and a lot of companies won't hire you if you aren't a carded member. A lot of places don't do so. I mainly do more freelance stuff at the moment, but I would like to get into it more professionally in the future. Thank you very much. And third and last question: what are your favorite Caseus moments? My favorite Caseus moments, probably anything in the final chapter of Jedi Master. That has some of my favorite moments, with Liara speaking with Yoda, Caseus burying Sarah's Padawan braid, and also the final two chapters of Nightfall. Like, all of those contain some of my favorite moments in the series so far. But there's been so many that I've loved writing that I could put up in my favorites. And I think once I finish with Jedi Redeemed and maybe Clone Wars Chronicles, whatever I do, I might put up another list detailing my 10 favorite moments. Thank you for your questions. So, from Jordan Cox, have you watched Tales of the Jedi? And if you have, what did you think of it? I have watched Tales of the Jedi. I still need to watch the last episode, but from what I've seen so far, I really, really enjoy it. I'm not one of those guys who gets, hung up on the continuity issues or whatever, as long as what we're given is good. And so far, it's been very, very good. I just wish the episodes were a little bit longer. Number 2, how do you feel about the writing of Jedi Redeemed? Are you satisfied with the direction you're going with it? So far, yes, I'm very satisfied. Jedi Redeemed is turning out so far to be the most challenging book in the series that I've written. Even beating out Jedi Master, which I said became very, very mentally taxing because I had so much that I wanted to fit into the book, but I had to keep it at a reasonable length. So with Jedi Redeemed, I'm kind of facing more of the opposite scenario, or a similar scenario in a way, because I want everything to flow well, I want it to be streamlined, but also there's a lot of stuff that needs to fit into this. And also, with this being, the 9th book in the series, obviously there's a little bit of a mental toll that it's taken, but I just have to keep telling myself, I love writing this book, all these books. I enjoy doing this, and I'm going to try and give you guys the best damn Caseus book I can. Number 3, who is your favorite side character in the Caseus series besides Dravok? I will actually answer that because someone else asked a similar question coming up, but just a short answer, I'll say Master Takai or Tosa, but I'll explain those when we get to the other question. Thank you, Jordan. From 212th Trooper, what if after Caseus' second encounter with Vader, he came across a backwater planet with no technology, but certain individuals were seemingly strong in the Force, some wielding the light and others twisted by the dark? In short, so as not to make this too long, what if Caseus went to Arda, and this was how he perceived it? So for those who don't know, Arda is basically Tolkien's Middle-earth, or the world that Middle-earth inhabits. I think Caseus would be kind of freaked out at first, especially like if he's stranded there. There's no way to get back to his galaxy. He'd have to wait for someone from his galaxy to find out where he was. But I think he'd also get along with a lot of the residents there, mainly hobbits. I think he'd get along well with them, and I think especially the elves. If he met the elves of Middle Earth, I think that their wisdom and stoic nature would remind him a lot of his master. And I think if some threat were to happen in Middle Earth, he'd do what he could to help them fight back. Number 2, how might the One Ring affect Caseus if it came into his possession? Oof. I think the One Ring would probably affect Caseus the way it affected Boromir. Caseus would want to try and use the ring to, stop the evil. He'd know the power that it has, and maybe he'd be a little bit more cautious than Boromir, but I think eventually the ring would probably end up overtaking him as well. And eventually it would just make its way back into the hands of Sauron itself. So that's what I think would happen. Thank you for your questions. From Corny Puddle. What made you decide to kill off Cassie's student? I was stunned. It took me a bit to realize she was really gone. I was expecting her to somehow survive or be saved. Not mad at the decision, it's just good writing. Just curious, what led you to this? What led me to it was, sorry, I can't talk right now. What led me to that decision was, I wanted to put Caseus in the lowest position he's ever been in his life, the absolute rock bottom of his life. And you might say, well, he already hit that in, Nightfall, Inner Storm, Jedi Exile, and that was his rock bottom from a certain point of view. But at the same time, he still had something that was pushing him forward, that he had a purpose, whether it was going after Vader in Inner Storm, working on Sabo's farm in Jedi Exile, and helping the citizens of Dantooine, or whether it was training Liara in Jedi Master. He still had that purpose to him. With the end of Ashes of the Order and then the beginning of Jedi Redeemed, he is now at the absolute lowest point we've ever seen him. He has no purpose, nothing, and he's a completely broken man. And so we're going to see how his character builds off this, how he will rise out of this if he can. And that's pretty much why I had Liara killed off at this point. Thank you for your question. From Milkman McGee. If Caseus had access to all the movies from our world, what would be in his top 5 personal favorites besides anything from the Star Wars franchise? He'd probably like Jaws, Lord of the Rings, Shawshank Redemption, and Dude, Where's My Car? Probably any of those. I don't know. He'd probably like a goofy, wacky comedy thrown in there. From Diamond 360. All right, time to bring my questions. Oh, he's got a couple. So, question 1. So not long ago, you released a versus poll where you put Caseus from Nightfall against Kylo Ren from The Rise of Skywalker. I want to know who you think would win, as well as if Caseus from Ashes of the Order has a better or worse chance than his younger self. So, on the one hand, Caseus, by the time of Ashes of the Order, is far more experienced. He's gone through a whole lot more, and he's still a fairly capable fighter. He's no slouch, but at the same time he is getting older. He's lost a lot of that youthful stamina that he used to have around the era of Nightfall. The main question would be if Kylo Ren can outlast Caseus and wear him down enough, like with constant barrages of attacks, or if Caseus is able to outduel Kylo. I think the main question, I think a lot of it is closer than people think. The poll suggested that Caseus would win in a 75 to 25 almost vote, with Caseus coming out on top. But I don't think it's fair to write Kylo off necessarily. Even though he's more untrained, he still has massive amounts of potential, and he is insanely powerful and has powers that Caseus has never come across, like his immobilizing force freeze ability that he has. And I think it's all a matter of who slips up first. Now, the majority of the time, I think that probably would be Kylo, but it's not out of the ballpark to see Caseus making a mistake that Kylo would then take advantage of. In the end, I do think Caseus would probably come out on top, but I can't say for certain. Number 2, we talked about how powerful Caseus is, but what about some of the other masters like Takai or Dravok, or what about some of the others like Takai or Dravok or even Liara compared to other Force wielders in the franchise? So Takai, I wouldn't put her on the level of she's insanely powerful. She's much like Caseus. Takai is not a Jedi who shines in how powerful or skillful she is, but Takai has a presence about her that her enemies find a bit off-putting in a way, in that she's completely calm in whatever battle she goes into. Like, her mind is completely clear, and her enemies can see that right off the bat, that she feels she has everything under control from the minute the battle starts. And sometimes that works to her advantage, other times it doesn't. Other times her enemies know they have her beaten. In terms of her power, I'd probably put her somewhere along the level of Obi-Wan around the time of Attack of the Clones, maybe early Clone Wars. And with her fighting styles, she specializes in Form 2 and Form 4. Those are the two fighting styles that suit her the best. So it also kind of depends on who we're putting her up against. With Dravok, I'd say he is probably more powerful than Takai, but he's also flawed in that he is, like many others who fall to the dark side, he becomes very overconfident of his abilities, very cocky and sure of himself. Dravok, I would probably put somewhere along the level, we're just going to keep using Obi-Wan for power list right here. I put him probably around Obi-Wan by the time of Revenge of the Sith, in terms of like how powerful he is. That's to say, not one of the most powerful we've ever seen, but definitely a threat. And his fighting style of Form 5 is definitely something to look out for, especially for characters who aren't prepared to deal with that level of an onslaught. With Liara, around the time of Ashes of the Order, I would probably say she's probably more or less on par with Caseus and his friends around that time period. Liara has a very strong connection to the Force, a lot like Rey in the sequels, in that she's not exactly a super well-trained Jedi, even though she has received a fair bit over her years of training with Caseus. But her strength in the Force is very admirable, and her growth has surprised even Caseus in how strong she's become in such a short period of time. And I think a lot of that is because Liara, much like many of the other Jedi during the prequels, became so strong at such an early age because her mind was more open to the possibilities that the Force could give her. When Liara was 11 and began her unofficial training with Caseus, and he was giving her lessons on Dantooine, she began to realize just how strong of an ally the Force could be and all the possibilities it gave. And rather than someone like Luke, who in Empire was struggling to lift rocks and lift the X-Wing because his mind was already closed off to the Force and he was so stuck in his worldview, Liara is perfectly willing to accept, that, the Force can allow me to do this, the Force can allow me to do this. And through her training with Caseus, she learns more and more that with the Force, nothing is impossible. I'd say Liara, her saber style is most likely a combination of Form 3 and Form 5, kind of like her master, because Caseus most likely taught her the forms he knew best and a little bit of the other forms that he had learned while training in lessons under Dravok. So she probably has a fairly balanced moveset, but that's not to say she's an invincible opponent in a fight. She's not someone you want to underestimate, but she's also not the greatest threat anyone's going to come against. Thank you very much for that question. Let's move on to the next question from you. He says, number 3, I've noticed that in the last few books, Gaidom has gotten a resurgence in the series from his small-time role in Book 2, Dawn of War. Was that initially planned or something that you came up with on the fly? So it was something that originally I was like, should this be another character? Like, who could this be? And then I remembered that Gaidom had an appearance in the second book, and I thought, what if Gaidom also made it out of there? Someone from Cassie's past who he had some connection to, but not a real, deep friendship with. And so I brought him in just to kind of test the waters. Originally, he wasn't going to show up again, but I liked the way he worked off of Caseus, as even though he's younger and they've both had similar experiences, he has a wisdom and forethought to him that Caseus, with all of his self-doubt and fear and his memories of everything that happened to him, something that he struggles to have, and it's that clarity of mind. And so I brought him in again in Ashes of the Order and now in Jedi Redeemed, and I honestly think it's worked out pretty well so far. It's been nice to be able to develop Gaiadom's character a little bit more. Number 4. This is more of a joke question, but in the old Legends timeline, there was a Jedi named Zayne Carrick who had this weird Force luck ability. Does Caseus have some sort of reversal on that with a Force tragedy power that causes everyone he loves to die, or does he just never catch a break? It's more that he just never catches a break. He's constantly being beat down by the galaxy. It's one of those, like, people say, why can't Cassius just get a girlfriend? Why do you have to make our boys suffer? I'm like, yeah, this is not a galaxy that favors someone like Cassius. The galaxy is constantly hunting the Jedi, and Cassius is doing what he can just to survive. And the fact that he's made it this long at all is quite frankly, the fact that he survived this long at all is quite frankly surprising. But no, he doesn't have a Force tragedy ability, although if you asked him, he'd probably say that he has something along those lines, that where just trouble seems to find him. And number 5, why is Pip the best character known to fiction, and why are there no other contenders? Funny story, when Pip was initially killed off in Ashes of the Order, I made a really stupid attempt at adding Pip's body into my own story so my characters could resurrect him, and it didn't really work out, and then he happened to live, and it was the greatest moment of my life. Thank you for the answer, should you choose to answer. Sincerely, Pip's biggest fan. Well, Pip thanks you a lot. I have realized that Pip is a fan favorite in the Caseus series, and that's part of the reason why I quote-unquote killed him off in Ashes of the Order. Part of it was, well, he'd be an obstacle to these guys that are trying to capture Caseus and Liara in the final chapter. But at the same time, I'm like, I want to see what people do. I want to see what people say in the comments about this. And you guys did not disappoint. You were all very upset when Pip died, and so bringing him back and seeing the comments like, my boy lives, Pip is back, that was fun. So thank you very much for your questions. We will move on to the next one. From Harrison Stallings, was there ever a time when you were writing Caseus where you lost motivation or thought of it as a chore? If so, what got you out of that mentality? Yes, a couple of times. The first time was probably around the writing of Jedi Master, and a few times during Ashes of the Order, and even a little bit right now during Jedi Redeemed, though not to the extent of during Jedi Master. And it started to become a chore because I had so many ideas going through my head, and I was struggling to find, where would this fit in? Where would this fit in? Like, where should they go next? Like, how do we keep the story flowing without it feeling like it's dragging on? And also the fact that, I enjoy putting out new chapters of these books every week, but at the same time, writing them based off of the outline that I have for the series, it can be a bit taxing, especially going back and, looking over to find any grammatical mistakes or whatnot. But what gets me out of that funk when I hit it is remembering that I love writing Caseus and that I love putting these stories out for you guys. And when I think of that, and I think of, how fulfilling it's going to be when everything's all said and done, that I have my own story set in Star Wars that I've put out there for the public, and people have read it and people enjoyed it, that's what keeps me going. From Clone Wars Chronicle official channel, when will Vader Part 3 come out? I think what you mean to say is, what do you consider the most slept-on character in the Caseus series? From Crank. Thank you for your question. This is where I said I would go back to who I think is the most slept-on character, or my favorite side character from the series. And I'd say it's probably, in terms of the most slept-on character that doesn't get enough attention, I'd say probably Tosa. I love Tosa as a character. The fact that he started out as this Trandoshan grunt working with Dravok and a few others to attack the Jedi Temple. Next time we see him, he's slumming it up on Nar Shaddaa, just struggling to get by. Then joining Caseus and Dravok in their plan to kill Vader. When that fails, he joins up with the Arabella. We don't know if that's going to go anywhere, but then we see him reappear in Jedi Master. He's still hanging out with them. He's like, they pay well. And then in Ashes of the Order, where he's pretty much fully committed to the cause. And so it's been fun to see Tosa, who started out as just a sleazeball, villainous character, sort of develop into a kind of anti-hero, rogue, mercenary kind of guy, and now more or less a hero working with the rebellion, which is not something you see often. A lot of species like Trandoshans aren't normally known for, working with the good guys or the rebellion, so it's kind of a refreshing take to see something like that. Thank you for your question. From Clone Commander Caleb, what is Dravok's lightsaber form? Dravok's lightsaber form is Form 5, Gemso. And that fits him very well because he is a very brunt, very forward, attack-heavy kind of character. Not one for flashy acrobatics and all that stuff. He's just there to attack and get the job done. From Moose Lords. Who is your favorite Sith Lord from the expanded universe? Mine, for example, is Darth Bane. From the expanded universe, I'd say my favorite Sith Lord is probably... it's tough to say. I'd say probably Darth Nihilus or Darth Bane. Darth Bane because his whole story is just so fascinating and how he came up with the rule of two and all that stuff. But I'd say ahead of Darth Bane, I'd probably put Darth Nihilus. And mainly because I played a lot of Knights of the Old Republic 2, the Sith Lords, when I was younger. And I just thought he was such a cool character, especially how he can just literally drain planets of their he eats planets. Like, you don't get much more evil than that. The Death Star blows up planets. Nihilus is like, I eat them. So, I'd say probably Darth Nihilus. Thank you for your question. From Justin Thompson, would you ever consider doing an animation for the Caseus series, or something like a retelling of the story so far, something like The Road of Caseus, where it shows key moments from his journey, or would it just be a reenactment for one of your favorite scenes, as it would be cool to see? Anyway, keep up the amazing job. Can't wait for the next chapter. That's an interesting question. If I had the time, the resources, and everything else it requires, for animation is so time consuming and expensive, and you want to get it just right. You don't want to be putting out something with food fight levels of animation quality. If I had all of that, yes, I would definitely do something like that for Caseus. At the time, I do not have access to that, so the most I can do is making that AI artwork and kind of showing key moments through images. So animation is kind of out of the question right now, unless someone else way more talented than me wanted to take my story and retell it through animation. They would have my full blessing to do that. But at the time, I do not have any plans for that. Thank you for your question. From Nicknames, did Caseus always hate Dravok, or in his training with him, or at the very least, he's semi-bonded with him? Caseus never really liked Dravok after what happened in Jedi Apprentice. Up until around the Inner Storm, Caseus despised Dravok, and even through most of their training he did. But throughout training with Dravok, I think he grew more of a respect for him, especially after realizing, what led him to make the choices that he did, and his love that he once held for Caseus Master. I don't think they ever formed a friendship, but I think they did form a very stable bond, in the sense that these are two characters who have been through a lot together, and they're not enemies so much as they are two characters who don't really like each other all that much, but who are working together for a common cause. And I think by the end, when Dravok does meet his end, I think both of them did find a sort of affection for each other, in that Dravok was proud at how far Caseus had come, and Caseus was somewhat saddened to see Dravok die, especially when Dravok sacrificed himself so Caseus didn't die. So I think there is a sort of bond there, but it's not a very affectionate one between them. Thank you for your question. And now finally from Ultra Shadow 95. Holy Lord, that is a lot of questions. Woo! Hey dude, I have a few questions. A few. All right, guys, I think you know what time it is. It's time for a speed read. And I think I'll only be answering a couple of these because this is a lot. So, number 1, what do you think would have happened if Caseus went with Corbin in Caseus Clone Wars? Like at the end of book 4. If Caseus went with Corbin, I don't think things would have gone the way Corbin thinks they would have gone. I think they would have gotten themselves into more trouble than they could handle, and eventually they would have needed the Jedi to bail them out again. And if something had happened to them, before Nightfall happened, and the Jedi weren't able to help them, they might have been screwed. Number 3, what are your thoughts on the new Sonic Frontiers prologues? I myself am hyped for it, as it seems they finally got the character of Knuckles right. I've really liked the Sonic Frontiers prologues. I actually just pre-ordered the game, so I'm excited to play it. Number 4, Bulbasaur, Charmander, or Squirtle? I'm fond of Squirtle myself. Real OGs play Bulbasaur. Hands down, Bulbasaur is the best. Number 5, what if instead of meeting Nomi Sunrider, Caseus spoke to Revan on Dantooine instead? Would he have learned to master both sides of the Force from Revan, or would something else have happened? I don't know if he would have spoken to Revan. Revan doesn't seem like the kind of person who would speak to someone like Caseus in this situation. And even if he did, I don't know if Revan would encourage Caseus to learn to use both sides of the Force. I also feel it was just a bit more thematically relevant to have Nomi Sunrider, who is a great Jedi in her own right, once a Grand Master, speaking to Caseus. Especially with Caseus feeling the way he is, he feels like he's a failure. He's failed as a Jedi. And so having someone as great as Nomi speaking to him to lift him back on his feet, in a sense, I felt was more thematically relevant. Number 6, in one of your previous Q&As, I asked what you think would have happened if Ezra was found before the end of the original trilogy, but you seem to have mistaken what I meant and instead thought, what if he was found afterwards? So I'll put it into better context. What if Ezra Bridger was found after A New Hope, but before The Empire Strikes Back? I personally think he'd take Luke under his wing at the end of Rebels, he was probably around Luke's level in Return of the Jedi. There's no telling how powerful he would have gotten from that point. I don't know. Let's see. If you mean like he was found as in like they found out where he was after what happened with Thrawn, I'm not sure because we have very little information on what happened to Ezra after that. As for him taking Luke as his student, I don't know if I would see that happening either, especially, let's say, Obi-Wan is still in the picture. I think it's more likely he would stick around with the Rebels. Maybe he'd go and find Ahsoka, and they'd probably do something together. But I can't see Ezra getting involved in the events of the original trilogy, even if he was around. I don't know. Just something doesn't sit right with that scenario. Number 7, pineapple on pizza or non-pineapple pizza? Depends on the pizza. Barbecue Hawaiian chicken pizza, delicious. Try it. Next question, if you could have any one Jedi Council member train you, who would it be? I think Plo Koon would be the best teacher for me. Plo Koon is definitely up there for me. Possibly Kit Fisto as well. I'd say probably one of those two. I think those were two of the most relatable council members, or possibly Obi-Wan Kenobi. Then again, we saw what happened to the last apprentice he trained. Number 9, have you watched Star Wars Theory, specifically Vader Shards of the Past? If so, what are your thoughts on them? I've been very vocal about my thoughts on Star Wars Theory and other Q&As. I don't dislike the guy as a person. I don't hate him. But I also just don't watch his content anymore because a lot of it got very stale and formulaic for me. Now, who's to say that my stuff isn't formulaic for other viewers? Who's to say that people just don't watch my stuff anymore. Like they came to my channel wanting what ifs, and they're just getting a bunch of this Caseus nonsense. But that's it. It mainly felt to me like I loved his what ifs when, a few years ago when he was putting them out, and I was really enjoying them. But then I started to notice anytime his what ifs involved something with Anakin, it almost always devolved into turning Anakin into a god-tier Jedi who would then go to the dark side and kill everyone and just become some supreme all-powerful being. And I thought it was just getting very formulaic, very repetitive, very predictable. I was excited when he said he was working on a Vader fan film, even donated money when he was doing a live stream to raise money for its production. Although I don't know if that money went to, I think it was just like supporting his channel so he could fund it himself. But regardless of what happened, then his Vader fan film, the first episode of it released, and I thought it was fine. I thought it was okay, and especially for a fan-made production with the budget that he had and what he had to work with, I think it was very well done. At the same time, though, I was seeing people all over the internet just gushing over it, saying like, "Oh, this is what Disney wishes they could do. This is the best Star Wars we've seen in years." I'm like, is it really? I wouldn't put it at god tier levels of Star Wars content, to be honest. There were a lot of weird decisions that he made. Like, I know it was a dream sequence, but like, he gave Vader Kylo's ability, or at least at the time it was Kylo's ability, where he was freezing the blaster shots in place and like stopping like a barrage of them, and it felt more or less like he was just going, oh, they had Kylo do this in the sequels, let's make Vader do it, but better. And I'm like, you couldn't just let Kylo have that one. Like, you already have Vader like being an unstoppable machine here. And then the biggest problem I had, like, he's bringing Mace Windu back, as like Mace Windu survived, and that was my big problem. Mace Windu is a character, I don't want them to have it that he survived his encounter with Palpatine in Revenge of the Sith. I want him to stay dead. Let Windu stay dead. If you want to bring Sam Jackson back, if he wants to come back, just de-age him and have him do something for a Clone Wars show or something like that. I just don't want to see Mace Windu come back. And so, all the best to him. I hope he's living a good life. I hope he gets his second part of his Vader film out. I hope he finishes the production. But honestly, I just don't care much for Star Wars theory anymore. Number 10, why does the name Corbin sound like Morphin from Power Rangers? It's Corbin time. And I think, I think that's where I'm going to have to cut it off for right now, because this video has already reached, what is it? Over a half hour. So thank you all so much for your questions, and we'll see you next time.